John Lennon of the Beatles, a rock and roll documentary by Mackenzie Guy for popular music in America. John Winston Lennon was born on October 9, 1940 in Liverpool, England, to mother Julia and father Alfred Lennon. John's father was absent from the day of his birth, but continued to send checks to help support his mother Julia in raising him. By the time John was 3 years old, the checks ceased to arrive, and John and his mother lost contact with his father. Without the financial support of his father, Julia struggled to raise him. By the time John reached the age of 4, he was taken into the care by his Aunt Mimi and Uncle George, who vowed to take care of them for Julia. They raised him in an upper-middle-class environment in Woolton, England, in a quaint home in the suburbs. They encouraged him to keep his mind active, so they supplied him with crossword puzzles and eventually instruments to keep his mind occupied. His Aunt Mimi bought him his first guitar at the age of 15. Lennon was quite the rambunctious teenager and often expressed his opinions boldly and blatantly. When Lennon was 15 years old, he was banned from his church for laughing loudly and sarcastically during a sermon. His spunk and creativity influenced him to form a band which incorporated the influences of jazz, blues, folk, and roots. It was called a skiffle genre. He soon formed the band The Quarrymen at age 16, named after the Quarry Bank High School he attended in 1956. The original members of this band were Lennon on vocals, Paul McCartney on guitar, George Harrison, lead guitar, and Stuart Sutcliffe on bass. They played at local shows and garage concerts with a spirited set of songs. In the early 1960s, they officialized their band as the Beatles. In 1962, Sutcliffe was replaced by Ringo Starr, and thus the infamous Quartet of the Beatles were formed. They became mainstream in the United Kingdom in 1963 and made their way to the United States in 1964. Their debut appearance on The Ed Sullivan Show in America surely showed their talent in America. Fans went crazy for their upbeat rhythm, lyrics, and boyish appearance. Thus, Beatlemania phenomenon began. Their manager at the time, Brian Epstein, was quite new to the music industry and played by the book in most scenarios. He insisted they play it safe by wearing professional unison attire. Lennon's bold character had issues with this conformity and worried that they were unable to express themselves with their appearance. After much arguing with their manager, he agreed to wear the outfits Epstein chose and saying, "I'll wear a balloon if someone pays me," in a sarcastic tone. Later down the line in 1966, Lennon was involuntarily introduced to LSD and was under its influence almost constantly until late 1967. He believed this experience brought him closer to his identity and further influenced a shift in their style of music. Songs like Strawberry Fields Forever and Lucy in the Sky with Diamonds were created during that time and were acclaimed for being astonishingly inventive. He met his wife-to-be, Yoko Ono, in the early 1970s, and after expressing his distaste towards conforming to popular tactics in the music industry, she helped persuading him to become a solo artist and split from the Beatles. He then said peace out to the Beatles and began in pursuit of his own solo career. He released his critically acclaimed solo album, Imagine, in 1972, where his lyrics turned from a fun, psychedelic story to touching on deeper topics, such as the opposition towards the Vietnam War that was presently happening, to envisioning a world peace with each other. His lyrics also enveloped atheistic views and presenting his idea of having a world with no opposing spiritual beliefs and praising philanthropy over deities. In one of his most popular songs of his solo career, Imagine, he is setting up the idea of a world with no religious influence, in saying, "Imagine there's no heaven, it's easy if you try, no hell below us, above us only sky." In referring to no hell below us, above us only sky, he is indicating that we have a more peaceful destiny than what it's played out to be, and that judging people for their faults are really poisoning our society. In the chorus he says, "Imagine all the people, living life in peace." He is setting a viewpoint for his mindset, that being one of a harmonious and neighborly attitude towards each other. He goes on to say, "You may say I'm a dreamer, but I'm not the only one." He is acknowledging that many people may reject his wish for change by calling him naive or a dreamer, but he also mentions that he isn't the only one with a philosophy to change the world, and others like Martin Luther King Jr. and Albert Einstein have pushed for their own change as well. His open rejection towards conventional religions stirred controversy in 1966 during an interview with the London Evening Standard. He was quoted in saying, "Christianity will go, it will vanish and shrink. I needn't argue that. I'm right and I'll be proved right. We're more popular than Jesus now. I don't know which will go first, rock and roll or Christianity." This sparked controversy because Christianity was a predominant religion in the US. and fans began to negatively question his stance. But in a positive light, it also gave food for thought for his readers about being open to question the philosophy of their religion. He continually pushed people to appreciate the simpler things in life and motivate them to apply their energy for greater good of mankind, in saying, if everyone demanded peace instead of another television set, then there'd be peace. He also reflected on his understanding of life and sensed that people don't really know what true happiness is, in saying, when I went to school, they asked me what I wanted to be when I grew up. I wrote down happy. They told me I didn't understand the assignment, and I told them they didn't understand life. He became a social activist and partook in many peaceful protests with his wife Yoko Ono. They held what they called bed-ins, which were a form of laid-back protests, similar to sit-ins. If there were week-long bed-ins at the Amsterdam Hilton Hotel, around their bed they made signs saying things like hair peace and bed peace to reiterate the simplicity of their message. They continued their activism until the tragic day in September. On December 8, 1980, a day before John Lennon would have turned 40 years old, he was assassinated while exiting his apartment complex. He was shot with a single bullet to the head and ultimately died on the scene. Many people mourned over his untimely passing and left people wondering how someone could kill someone so peaceful like John Lennon. That person was Mark David Chapman, and he received a sentence of 20 years to life in prison. Although he's been on parole 8 times since his sentence, he has been denied every time. After news broke of Lennon's assassination, it left many people wondering, why would Mark Chapman do this? In an interview with CNN, Chapman insisted that Lennon was a phony. He also admitted he fantasized killing a celebrity, and Lennon was the easiest target for him at the time. In memory of his legacy, a statue was made of him to stand outside one of his favorite pubs in his hometown of Liverpool. Central Park in New York City commemorated him with a mosaic reading Imagine for fans to pay respect. John Lennon's solo career sparked a cultural mindset of tranquility and philanthropy. His already well-established status as a musical artist helped him spread his ideology through his music, and challenge his listeners to question their beliefs as well.